Grow through what you go through. Flowers have always been a passion of mine. I love the rainbow of colors and their beauty. One of the things that most impress me about them is despite the various conditions they face, with the right amount of tender love and care, they bloom. Living in Western Pennsylvania, the weather is unpredictable, and the spring season is no exception. One moment it is warm and sunny, and the next it's cold and snowy. Despite the difficulty, the flowers will grow in their own time. My learning disability has been like having a flower growing in harsh conditions. Much like the flowers blooming in places that were not ideal, I had to grow into what I went through. I grew against all odds throughout the 12 years of public school. I struggled academically and socially. Academically, my challenges were math, reading, comprehension, visual perception, and fine motor skills. Socially, it was difficult to make friends, and I was bullied for having a disability. The small school district made it impossible to hide having one. Thankfully, I was identified in kindergarten as a young seedling. I was given support services and accommodations that nourished me. I was given specialty instruction and accommodations to help me learn. My parents were my sunshine and never gave up on me. Eventually, I began to do well in school and was in all regular ed classes except for math. I graduated and was determined to go on to college, despite people who did not think that I could handle the work. During college, I once again had to blossom against adversities. I struggled academically at college. There was a stigma that surrounded disability accommodations. Many of my peers and professors thought that they gave people an unfair advantage. I decided not to use them, and my grades plummeted even further. It was not until I used them that my grades improved. I fully bloomed when I graduated with a bachelor's degree, despite being told it was unlikely that I would ever be able to do so. Every time I see a flower, I marvel at its beauty and strength. To fully grow, it must grow through a process and many difficulties. Gazing upon the bloom causes me to reflect on the journey I've had to endure and the person I am today. Many people see accomplishments and think that I've overcome my disability. I will always have one. The same way a flower will always be a flower. I simply cannot change who I am and often my circumstances. I choose how I will handle the difficulties. Much like the flower, I choose to thrive. I will not shrivel and wilt. Instead, I will blossom and grow in whatever I go through.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining my podcast today.
Okay.
I'm going to start with number one. This is an across-the-board statement. I would wish for anybody that I knew or a stranger for the skill that you have, and that is looking at the world as if it were butterflies and flowers. And the way that you analyze your life with the flowers and butterflies, I know you love them both. Um,
Mhm.
but how, at what point in your, you come from a great family, but
Mhm.
why don't you tell people a little bit about your town? Where you live?
Sure. I live in a small town just right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So we have there's not a whole lot to do, but there's a lot of nature and butterflies and flowers, and we have all four seasons. So it's really it's an experience.
Yes, I live on the East Coast too, so I feel your pain about the Four Seasons. Yeah, it's and I grew up here, but I lived in Los Angeles for a very long time. And when I moved back, I remember my body shock going, okay, what this winter thing? But I love how you use it as a metaphor for at every stage of your life because you are a fighter. Um, why don't you talk a little more about the way that your schools dealt with your particular issues? I will firstly say that I think you should explain what was offered to you and what wasn't. Because after our initial conversation, um, and I think this happens to a lot of people with disabilities, the school system makes the judgment that you need extra help, and they don't say, because you're good at English, you're good at writing, you're good at history. So math was really the only place you had a problem. So I I don't really know the legal rules of it, but it seems to me it would have been a lot easier had they just put you in the special section that needed help in the math, and then you should have been in the other. Again, I'm not making an opinion. I'm not an educator, but in terms of your social life, do you think that would have made a difference?
I think that there would be certain things that would make a difference. In the very beginning, I was all in special ed classes. I had it for reading, I had it for writing, I had it also for math. But one of the things as I progressed throughout school, I started to become in all regular ed classes, except for math and also a resource source. So they did accommodate my needs as I got older. And I did think that it really helped me in my life because I had teachers that could see that I could read real well, or I could write, or I could speak. And everything, it was just not having the math, that was really difficult.
Um, I'm quite sure of that, but you're not
Mhm.
alone there. I think that
Yes.
everybody has their own definition what of learning disability, and I almost I almost feel like I think you should discuss it. But the thing that impressed me the most about you is that you mentioned a learning disability, but that's not the at the underlying theme of
Nope.
what you're about and what you do. Why don't you tell people a little bit about your parents and how they brought you up and how you started to love gardening?
I can tell you that my mom and dad never gave up on me. They were the ones that supported me all throughout those years. We spent a lot of one tearful homes. work sessions together, but they made me go to school. And they also really encouraged me to try my best. And they set me up for success in life. And I couldn't have made it throughout school without them. Now, with my love for gardening and flowers, that definitely came with them. My grandfather had a farm, and he grew strawberries and had lots of flowers. And then my parents, they also are gardeners as well. So I really grew to love nature and flowers and butterflies.
And that is what inspired you to start taking pictures. You're also a fantastic photographer and writer, and you have your own blog where you discuss everything that's on your mind in a very easy to read way. So and it's called Michelle's Mission. You should all go on it and read it. So, Michelle, one of the points that I made with you last evening, and again, you can answer this however you choose. But one of my theories about life is that as much as mental health or healthcare or help people with disabilities, people say that they're sympathetic, and I think a lot of them say that, but they still judge based on that. So
I agree 100%. There's a lot of times people will ask me, well, you're disabled. You don't look like you're disabled. And I have to explain, well, there's some disabilities we can see and other ones we can't. And sometimes I think people also just want to like kind of put that as an excuse when they have something. And I think everybody's human. And I think sometimes we have to give ourselves grace for other people and also for ourselves as well.
I agree with that. That's a very good explanation, because I do always find that a little surprising, and I don't agree with just pretending. So,
Agreed.
and you are now a teacher. And I am sure you're a great one. I'd like to be in your classroom. I wish I had such a cheery teacher ever. Why don't you tell people about your teaching and what you do and why that's part of your butterflies and flowers?
I work as a paraeducator at a school. I work with seventh graders this year. I can help the kids with everything except for math.
Yeah.
They all know that. Or we'll soon find out.
Yeah.
And I go into the classroom and I help them with their work. And I also show them how to advocate for themselves. Because a lot of my students, I understand what that's like to be a student with a disability in the classroom. So I really try to work with them, not only on their school work, but also with how to advocate. Because one day all my students will leave me, and I hope and pray that every dream of theirs comes true. But for so many of them, their disabilities are going to be there. So I want to make sure that they know how to advocate for themselves.
That is such an important skill, because as you get older, and I'm no youngster, certainly I have found in terms of my medical care that I have to question and fight for everything that for every answer. I am not fun for a patient because I drive them crazy because it's like, well, why are you doing this? What's the test mean? How are you reading this test? And they get frustrated. So, but you obviously have to keep that going in your adulthood. So if you learn that young enough, that's that's amazing. And I think I've never actually heard of a teacher teaching that to young kids, and that is such an important message. And I think for everybody listening, that is a major takeaway. So, what's your favorite flower? What's your favorite?
I love lilac. I just love the smell of them. And they also bring me back to my childhood. My grandpa had lilacs that belonged on his farm. And I just remember being a little girl, sitting underneath that tree and just smelling them. And we have a lilac bush in our yard. And I just look forward to every May when they start to bud and bloom.
I love that. I resent my lilacs because I have beautiful ones in the front of my house, and I'm so happy when they come out, but then they go away just like that. And so I get a little angry with them. What else do you have? But I'm sure you have plants next year, the lilacs, right? So it doesn't look like a bunch of dead clouds.
I have daylilies that are blooming in the summer. I also have white peonies and I have pink ones.
Peony.
Yep. That's the flower we had at your wedding.
Oh, let's make sure, can we talk about your wedding? Is that okay?
Sure.
If we talk
I would love to.
Your husband and how you met, and
sure.
I think it was also you're very smart because you made a life choice with a partner at a phase at an age that a lot of people do not make the right choice. So
right.
So how
I got married later in my life. I'm 35 when I got married. And I knew that I always wanted to get married, but I worried that I wouldn't find somebody with my disability. And I can remember being so tired of being in broken relationships that I decided to pray, and that I didn't want to be with anybody until God sent the right person for me. And there were so many signs. I can remember I was volunteering at an art center, and somebody asked me, "Are you seeing anyone right now?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "I have a feeling that you're going to meet some person at a place like this." And that's exactly where I met him. I also had a friend that had a dream that I was standing in front of the courthouse with the vintage wedding dress on, and that there was a guy that he didn't know. And I would say, "Okay, I can understand the vintage wedding dress. That's my style." But I was wondering, why would I be in front of the courthouse? And who is this guy? And we had a reception at the Arts Center. And then we walked up a park that overlooks the courthouse. And there I am standing in a vintage wedding dress with my husband and the courthouse in the background. And I didn't realize it until we got the pictures back. Now, the venue where we got married at It was a rental that had a garden in the back. And years before, I lived there. I lived right next door. And I decided that's where I want to get married at.
So,
And my husband,
what I mean, there's another little capability of yours, and you're a little bit psychic, and does your relationship with God, and you obviously have one, and it's very strong. Have you always had that? Did your parents teach you that, and to have that as a support system in addition to people in day and day?
yes. My parents I was raised Catholic. So we went to church on every Sundays, and they planted that seed. And I went to a vacation Bible school, and I accepted Christ. And then for a lot of years, I went to the Catholic Church. But then I got involved with the faith-based art group, and I saw more of a relation side with God. So I decided whenever I moved out on my own, I wasn't going to be Catholic. But I found a church that we like to go. Yep.
No, something tells me you never had to go to confession because you're sort of.
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm far from perfect.
Well, okay. Well, I'm not asking this for religious reasons, but now, I didn't expect to have to ask you this, but if you don't mind, what kind of thing would you say in confession? Is it that you are thinking not negative things, or?
As little, I might have talked about a fight I have with somebody, or an argument, or total lies, or something. With little kids would do, those things.
Okay, so that's like a therapy session.
Yeah.
That's not confessing anything. So you didn't,
Right.
as I suspect, you didn't do anything wrong. Can you, now that we have shared, or you have shared with everybody, the basic spirit that I love about you, the butterflies and the rainbows and the magic, and all of those things. Would you mind describing a little bit more about your actual disability and what it is?
Sure. I have dyscalculia, which is a math learning disability. It affects how I relate to numbers. I'm not able to read the face of a clock. I confuse my right from my left. I get lost in the steps of a problem. I also have visual perception issues, and that affects my reaction time and eye hand cord inflammation. But it's not in my eyes. I also have limited hand dexterity in both of my hands, so it affects my fine motor skill and unlocking and locking doors, and my handwriting.
Oh, well, that handwriting is apparently nobody knows how to do penmanship anymore. And you mentioned the clock thing, and I have heard on the news, and it's shocking to me, that they're removing clocks from classrooms because nobody knows how to tell time, and that's a little shocking. Would you also mind discussing the other physical aspects that were challenging for you, like physically, not just mentally?
Sure.
You told me about your feet and your legs. If you don't want to
Right.
masturbate on that,
Sure, I would be happy to. My feet turn in when I walk. And that was based how I was positioned in the wheel. And my parents, when I was first starting to walk, decided that they noticed something was really different. So they took me to the doctor and they said that, okay, well, let's try some special shoes. And that didn't work. And then they gave my parents the decision of whether to break my pelvis or to operate on my feet. So they decided to operate on my feet. And it worked for a while, but after a while I started walking, it was the same thing with the feet turning in. And I also have scoliosis, and I'm really lucky. It hadn't really affected me, and I didn't need to have surgery for it.
Well, so, but in a very odd way, it's almost good in some ways that you that was what you knew from day one, and it didn't take 10 years to develop because you knew and your parents knew and your support system and friends they accepted and knew about your situation from the very beginning, so they had to deal with it from there. So they must have had a special program for you, and that's fantastic. And I'm not saying obviously it's not fantastic that you have these things, but your parents sound amazing. And can you talk a little bit more about them and their background and what influenced them, which in turn then influenced how they raised you?
I can remember both my parents worked from the time I was young, and that really encouraged me to go out there and to work and to do that. I'm also a proud first generation college student. I had other members in my extended family that went to college, but my parents didn't. But they always encouraged me to go after my dreams.
Well, and so you did. And again, I told you I was so inspired by your photographs and the fact that you told me that one of your very favorite things are butterfly gardens. Can you talk about what do you feel like when you go into a butterfly garden? Is that suddenly the magic place that in your head?
It is magical. It's just where I get that chance to be with the butterflies and the flowers, and I get to see all those deep details. And sometimes I get to take pictures of details that other people will miss.
Right.
Mostly I get that on my walks. Because I'm not able to drive, I get that chance to literally stop and smell the roses.
No pun intended.
And
yeah,
people say, yeah, you bring up those details. And I think to myself, if I was so sad that I didn't get to have a chance to drive, there's so much beauty I would miss. And then I look at my life with a disability and think there's so much beauty that I almost missed that I wouldn't have without it.
wow. So I think that that is what makes you special as a person too, because you look at people and treat them in the same way in reality, but also metaphorically, in terms of those butterflies and flowers. So can you talk a little more about your blog and when you started that and what inspired that? And oh my goodness, how did you get published. What was that? What's
I'd be happy to.
Well, I mean, that's a journey. So, take your time, say whatever you would like. As I always say on this podcast, none of these stories are my stories to tell, and wouldn't. I have no place. I would never judge on anybody. So basically, you have the floor. So let's hear the journey. Okay, that's
Reading and writing have always been important to me. When I was a young child, my dad found a story about a dinosaur that I wrote years ago.
okay.
And he said, wow, this is really good. And that just set me on this journey where reading and writing were my world. And I started a blog 6 years ago. And I started out with just talking about my life with a disability and featuring my photography. How I got published was I had a writing group for years who told me I should talk about writing about having a disability.
Right.
And I just said, no, I don't want to do that. I put it on the shelf for a number of years until I was diagnosed with limited hand dexterity, and I could not open up my front door. And I was so frustrated that I wrote my first article and submitted it to the Biden. And I had such a great response that it encouraged me to write more articles for them and to write for other people as well. And I also to start my own blog.
Well, that's amazing because, again, I made that comment that a lot of people really aren't they say that they're sympathetic, but there are just as many people, if not more, who are, especially when it comes to sort of a community, which the online social media, do you have a community that you are on there that's private, that with people that you can talk to?
I do have a few disability groups that are wonderful to talk to. And I've also met other people that have a math learning disability. And that's not something I had all those years ago.
That's really interesting because that's very therapeutic. I'm in a couple of groups that I never thought that I would be in, and I rarely say anything, but I personally find them inspirational, and I always take some little piece, right? And so you must do that, but I'm just gonna guess that you chime in a lot. Am I right?
I try to. Or I'll share a lot in the blog. And I just hope that other people will see this and know that they're not alone. And I think by being vulnerable and sharing our struggles, that gives other people the permission to do that as well. And I hear their stories. And I know I'm not alone.
Well, number one, we'll put a link to your blog up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope people will really read it and really understand what makes you tick and why you keep on going the way that you do. Does your husband like to garden?
Yes. And in fact, he made a butterfly garden one year. And that's how I got my first butterfly. he brought in these flowers from his garden. And on it, at first, like a speck of dirt. And I kept thinking, oh, I should get rid of this. And I didn't. And then it started to run into like a worm. And then it was a caterpillar. And I thought, oh, this is a butterfly. And I got to watch that caterpillar grow. And then we got to see it turn into its chrysalis that was all green. It had some gold on the top. And then we got to watch it hatch and blossom into a butterfly. And it was a monarch. And that just started me wanting to get butterfly kids every year.
That's so sweet because it is so metaphorical with the way that you function in the world. I find it amazing, going back to your husband and your wedding, that you almost had again, I used the word psychic before, but you had a dream of what you wanted, and you got it, and that most people that does not happen to. But what else would you like people to focus on your blog? What part of is it the most important thing for you? Again, I think the pictures speak volumes, and show people, invite people in to read more of your stories, and the visuals are very important. And never mind that you like doing it. But I mean, that makes it fun and beautiful. And I used this word earlier with you, bring out the magic. So how do you keep that magic going? And how many pages how long is your blog? And how often do you put new things in it?
I will put new stories about once a month. My goal is to start blogging more, but I do try to update the photography regularly. And I also will put my podcast episodes. So after they get aired, I will put them up there as well. And I also put when I get published somewhere else, so they can find the links to that.
Wow. Okay. So again, for everybody who's watching, there will be a direct link to your work.
Yep.
What inspired your podcast, and when did you start that?
I don't have a podcast myself, but I do put my episodes so way other people can listen to them.
Oh,
if they want to.
You mean your poetry, or?
I do put up my writing.
Okay.
And I write about nature.
Okay.
And I tied it with having a disability.
Okay. Well, yes, I misspoke, and I apologize. I thought you
said. It's okay.
I think you said podcast about what? You just keep coming up with little surprises of happiness. And as you know, my mission here on this podcast, and it's honest and it's true, is to just make a little treasure hunt for yourself. I have, by the way, I'll continue explaining before I go there, but that makes me look for little pieces of happiness with anybody in any kind of arts. That I talk to directors, I talk to musicians, it runs the gamut. And I like to study how, like, their journeys, because everybody is so different, and artists are struggle, and that's the real world today. So I always say, like, okay, what keeps you going? And it's been fascinating for me, really, is because it's almost like sociological studies of, everybody has vulnerabilities. Some people want to talk about it and some people don't. So uh, either way, I have found this studying and quest, whatever you like to call it, really, really interesting. And everybody, as I said, everybody that I talk to and comes on is so very different. And I mean, okay, here's a question for you, Michelle.
Mhm.
If you had a quest, a treasure hunt of your own, what would it be, and what would you like to find?
I think on my treasure hunt, I would love to find butterflies, flowers, and just other beautiful things. And I get to go on the treasure hunt every day. When I'm on my walks, nature just surprises me every day with just these beautiful flowers or a butterfly. And I just have to look for that good in even the worst situations.
Uh, one of something else that I always say is that some of my treasure hunt finds are people and things that I relook at, and I'm like, you know what, this person and this talent, they're already in the treasure hunt, but I love digging for the new ones. So would you say your treasure hunt for flowers and butterflies, would you say, and I'm just going to guess, that you have your staples that you already know what they're going to look like? You know how long they're going to live. You know when they're going to bloom. So that's ingrained already in you. But do you take pleasure in seeing the new ones and the new colored butterflies? I'm going to suspect you do, because one of your
I do.
photographs features the butterfly wings of a blue butterfly. Why blue? And why again? Tell me your treasure hunt. The old stuff you already knew, and the new things that you find and look for.
Right. One of the things my husband and I love to go to Phipps Conservancy in Pittsburgh and Botanical Garden all over the place. And sometimes we might go to the same show, but there'll be days that it'll be packed or weeks. And then something new is blooming. It's something we never seen before. And then we're like, oh, did you see that? And then he's like, no. And we get the chance to experience that nearness together.
That's I love that. I love that, and I love it for you that you have access to that within our work, because that's most people don't have that. The only one I know of, I live on the East Coast. The zoo in Boston they built a butterfly garden when my children were very young, and I had never been in one before. And I remember bringing my kids in there. It was quiet, it was warm. They also had butterflies, and my kids sort of took a stop. And I said, when I used to take them there, and I did that obviously a bunch of times, it was always the same mode. They had the petting of this and the petting of that, and they liked that. But again, the butterfly gardens are special. Do you feel, when you are teaching your students, do you feel like you are is one of your goals, and I'm going to just bet you say this, is there anything about that teaching that you do that makes you feel like you're helping your students bloom in one way or another?
I think with my experience of having a disability, I can understand where many of them are feeling at that point. And I think if I didn't have a disability, I wouldn't know that. And they start out as that seedling, and then I get to watch them blossom and grow, and I get to spread those seeds, and that influences the future generations that come out.
Wow, okay. Yeah, but as we discussed, you get them in 7th grade. So they already kind of start to bloom. But I remember my children in 7th grade. They think they're fully formed, but they're not. But 7th graders in general, I find, are very opinionated already. So how do you make the shift to inspire them? Is there anything that you are always works for you? Do you have that formula? I'm sure it's different for everybody, but no, I would observe that it's just your basic spirit to be around, because again, talking to you is it's a happiness. So that's why you're on here.
One of the things I try to do is find what they're good at. If they're drawing a picture, I say, "Wow, you're a great artist," and that boosts that self-esteem. And I also just show them how to advocate, because that's so key for them. And I also will help them by listening to them, and just try to be that encouraging voice that I wish that I had whenever I was going to school.
So you're not, when you use the term advocate before, but it was in terms of a medical situation. But the fact that you acknowledge, and again, my messages and my interests here are very similar to that, because as I previously stated, I want to find one little, piece of joy, and really feel like that finding that one that it's so hard, but to, be brave enough to put it themselves out there, because social media is not very forgiving.
Right.
But to have that one teacher say, "You know what? Fantastic painting, even if it's a circle. If they try, everybody deserves a little bit, a nod of acknowledgement, I think." So again, that's one of the themes of this whole thing. And then I hope that you have enjoyed this discussion. I have certainly have, and I thank you so much for having joined us. And is there anything you would like to say in closing?
I would love to tell people the success doesn't always come in the package you expect. Sometimes it comes in something can be even better.
That's a fantastic mantra. And we will, for all the guests here, you will find the link to Michelle directly on this podcast, and I'm going to talk a little more about you, I think, occasionally on my podcast channel, because you are inspirational. So it might not be mentioning your name, but in closing, how do you find that magic in yourself, right? And how does that happen? That's a good overall theme. So in closing, that's a goal.
I just look for the beauty in every situation, and joy.
Yes, and in this world today, in this very difficult environment, that's hard. But if you can manage to do that, that's fantastic. And again, that's the purpose of my podcast, is to really, again, acknowledge people who just try to do that and have a positive viewpoint and inspires them to do their art or their music or anything. So I thank you, Michelle, so much. Again, if anybody wants to read Michelle's, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I hope I'll talk to you soon.
Yes.